last weekend, my son and his wife took a long weekend in Louisville, Kentucky. There were a couple of reasons for that trip, sort of like a mini vacation. One reason is that a couple of my son's fraternity brothers from MU, a couple of you know that school, right?
Yeah.
Live in that Kentucky area and not too far. And they just decided that they and their significant others, they would all get together kind of for a long weekend. And so there were many possible locations. But then the other reason for choosing Louisville is my son's wife is a huge baseball fan. Yeah. And they wanted the opportunity to visit the Louisville Slugger production facility. So they all drive in, they get there, they decide that they're going to rent kind of a B&B. So they're all kind of staying at the same place, more of a comfy atmosphere. And they do some different things. You know, they go out and, a couple of restaurants that do. There's something called a hot brown fish. Has anybody ever heard of that before? I have. Apparently there's this hotel restaurant that has this signature plate. And it's like ham and turkey and bacon and like a gravy kind of a sauce kind of thing. I guess in the region, everybody knows what a hot brown is. So they went to one restaurant, and one of Ryan's friends ordered it, came out, and he said, it didn't look so good. Then his friend tasted it and kind of confirmed it didn't taste so good. So, okay. Now, to be just about that and right about that, the following day they went to the hotel restaurant where that's the signature plate. Ordered it there. It looked different. It was prepared different. He said, it tasted really good. So that's really curious because on the hotel restaurant's website, they have the recipe and exactly how to do it. Well, some of us humans don't follow directions as well as others, I guess, and I can plead guilty when it comes to that. And then there was the afternoon that they actually went to the Louisville Slugger factory. And they kind of got to tour that. And to give you an idea of how big a fan my son's wife is of baseball, she has this little wish list, okay? And was it last August or the August before, for her birthday, he gave them both kind of a couple of tickets to the Kansas City Royals Boston Red Sox in Finland. So that was like the thing, right? So they go to the Louisville Slugger factory, and he explained that they watched the making of two bats. One was, here's this guy at a lathe, the traditional way, the way it started out, with a lathe, turning that, and carefully, moving from this end of the bat down. Said, I forget what he said. It was something like took 15 minutes or something like that to carefully, proceed down the bat. Then they went over to the newer facility. It went in. It was computer controlled. 30 seconds, the bat was done, except for knocking off the end stubs, the finishing, and burning the logo in. And they did explain how, with the computer assists there, that they're able to store the dimensions of all of the professional hitters. So if Alex Rodriguez, wanted to order 100 bats, they'd pull up whatever his, and it would produce that bat exactly the way he wanted. I think Ryan said it was 31 1/4 inches. Just the right barrel size. The amount of taper so that the weight is balanced right. The size of the barrel, for the hand size and everything, all of that. The type of the nub, softer, harder. Everything pre-programmed. So every one of those 100 bats would be exactly the same. If Alex Gordon called up, wanted 100 bats, boom, they'd pull up his specs. Exactly the same. Just the way he wanted it. So, okay, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So, kind of after the weekend, long about Sunday afternoon, the other fraternity brothers, they and their significant others headed back home. And my son and his wife were there in the B&B with the rest of the afternoon and evening because they were not going to start back to Kansas City until Monday morning. And they had an opportunity to just slow down, settle down, and kind of enjoy some time together. A lot of us don't have those opportunities very often. I mean, we do have, how many of us here have had loss of electricity due to an ice storm or hurricane or something like that? We don't have electricity for hours or a day or something like that. But when we're at home, there's always something to do. You always find something to do, or somebody finds something for you to do. Whether it be folding this, putting away that, cleaning out the closet, whatever. There's always something to do. But not when you're in another place. So what often happens is people actually talk and communicate. And that's where I think we kind of are here in our gospel story of this morning. Because remember the setting. We're still in the Easter season. Right? The chancel's still adorned in white. We're still in the Easter season. And of course we remember the steps that have happened so far here. Resurrection Sunday. That night, Jesus appears in the upper room. Thomas isn't there. We think that during that week, many of the disciples are up in the Sea of Galilee. They go out fishing. Just like the angel told the women at the tomb Sunday morning, go to Galilee. Jesus will meet you there. So he was up there, he met them. He was on the shore cooking breakfast. We talked about that last week. The Sunday after Resurrection Sunday, that night, Jesus comes back to the upper room. This time Thomas is there. Of course, we talked about that 2 Sundays ago. And at the end of that evening, Jesus tells the disciples, stay in Jerusalem until you have received power from on high. We understand and know that to mean until Pentecost. So there's a waiting period. Jesus didn't tell them really to do anything else. Remember, for 3 years, especially the ones that were with Jesus from the very beginning, for 3 years, Jesus was directing every day where they would go, who they would eat with, who they would minister to. The disciples would bring people to them. Jesus was the center of their life every day for 3 years. For 1,000 days. And now, they're just told to remain in Jerusalem and wait. That's it. Imagine the vacuum there. Jesus didn't give them any hint as to how long they would be waiting. That makes it even harder. Right. Right. So, as the disciples there, remember they're not at home. They're in Jerusalem. They certainly don't have any video games or anything to play on their cell phones. They don't have any internet or anything like that. So I suspect they were doing a lot of talking. And they had about the last 1,000 days or so of things to talk about. And we know how it is when we're all sharing one event. Everybody comes away with a slightly different perspective or describes it differently. So I can imagine the disciples coming together thinking, remember the time when? And then they bring that scene back up and they talk about it and they talk it out a little bit. And kind of one disciple remembers a particular thing about it and another disciple remembers something else. As we look at John chapter 10, we can imagine that this story in here in chapter 10, during those days of waiting for Pentecost, is one of those events that that the disciples likely talked about. And Jesus starts it out, beginning with the first verse. Very truly I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate but climbs in by some other way is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but the Pharisees did not understand what he was telling them. Therefore, Jesus said again, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief only comes to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he's a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life, only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father. The word of the Lord. So we start out with the words, very truly I tell you. Now, Jesus doesn't always use that. Very truly I tell you. But quite a few times throughout the Gospels, we see that. And each time, it's like an underscore. It's like a loudspeaker. It's like, hey, this is important. Pay particular attention. And then he says, very truly I tell you, Pharisees. So Jesus is speaking right in their face. See, this chapter 10 happened right after Jesus had healed someone who had been blind from birth. Well, right under their noses. Well, the Pharisees, those Pharisees, they don't like all that goings on. But Jesus says, now, very truly I tell you. And then he says, the one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. So verse 2 is just being pretty plain and clear about it. There is a gate. There is a gate. And the gatekeeper opens the gate for him. Jesus goes on to say, very truly I tell you, again, the second time, within this same chapter. It says, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. So the first part of it, he says, there is a gate. The second part, he says, I am the gate. I am the gate. There are times in the Bible here where the two words I am have significant importance. So we remember right back when Moses was attracted up on the mountain by the burning bush. And Moses said, well, who should I say sent me to the Pharaoh? And of course we remember that God said, tell them I am. So very early on we're introduced to that I am. So the fact that Jesus here, in the face of those Pharisees who knew all that Genesis, Moses stuff really well, here is Jesus saying, I am. I am. And Jesus says in here in verse 7, I am the gate for the sheep. In verse 9, I am the gate. In verse 11, I am the good shepherd. In verse 14, I am the good shepherd. So I guess you could say he's kind of nailing that point home pretty well. And then he comes back around and he talks about that the Father loves me because I lay down my life only to take it up again. And he underscores, he tells everybody ahead of time what's going to happen. He says, no one takes it from me. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. And we talked a couple of weeks ago how Jesus had a choice. All that suffering out in the garden, he had a choice. He could have said no. He could have walked away. God gave him free will, just like he gives us free will. But Jesus says, I lay it down of my own accord. And then, again, in the face of the Pharisees, I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. Then if there's any doubt, after Jesus hammering the Pharisees with the I am statements, and that I have authority statements, he kind of wraps that up and in their face says, this command I received from my Father. A few verses earlier, we talk about, when we look at verse 16, he says, I have other sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this pen. So, he's talking about the Gentiles. He's talking about the people who are not of the tribe and family of Abraham. He's talking about the Gentiles. He's talking about us. He's saying right there, I have other sheep that are not of this pen. I must bring them also. And that's good news for us. I mean, that's why we're here. Right? Let's pray. Loving Lord, Good Shepherd. Thank you for being the Good Shepherd. Thank you for leading us. Thank you for protecting us. And especially, thank you for bringing us in. And all God's people said, Amen. Hymn number 368.